Hello everyone, and welcome to another session of our malicious compliance. Picture yourself lounging on a beach in Zanzibar, a cocktail in your hand, entirely unpaid during an approved sabbatical. Then, out of the blue, a new manager you have never even seen before labels you dead weight and dismisses you via email. He believes he's trimming expenses, but he is oblivious to the fact that he has just forfeited the company's claim to its entire product portfolio. Let's get straight to the narrative. The Reddit malicious compliance story is titled as follows. I am employed in the field of luxury outdoor furniture design. This isn't the inexpensive plastic furniture you find at garden supply stores, but rather the premium items that five-star hotels place around their pools and shorelines. Imagine oversized sun loungers, stylish cabanas, refined daybeds, and the striking pagodas that offer the perfect amount of shade while maintaining a stunning appearance. It's a specialized market, yet a lucrative one, particularly in the Mediterranean region where hotels are prepared to invest heavily in furniture that can endure the weather while also looking fabulous in Instagram posts. I have been in this field for more than 10 years, employed by a firm headquartered in Cyprus. When I first joined, the company was small, with perhaps only 15 employees in total, and they were finding it difficult to stand out in a competitive marketplace. The founder was a respectable man who understood the commercial aspects but freely acknowledged his complete lack of creative insight. This is where my role began. From my very first day, I was the one sketching out concepts, constructing prototypes in the workshop, adjusting measurements, and experimenting with materials. In essence, I was building the entire product catalog from the ground up. I would spend entire days in the workshop with sawdust in my hair, then travel to hotels throughout Greece, Italy, Spain, and Turkey to personally supervise installations and gather feedback from resort managers. It was certainly demanding, but it was also fulfilling, and gradually, our designs began to attract attention. Hotels started to specifically ask for our furniture because it had a unique, more sophisticated, and thoughtfully crafted appearance compared to our rivals. Now for the vital detail that everyone seemed to overlook. In the early days, when the company was small and intellectual property was not a major concern, I had a lawyer friend assist with my employment contract negotiations. I was young and somewhat naive, but my friend was astute. He insisted on a clause stating that I would hold the registered design rights for all physical products I developed. The form, the appearance, the arrangement, all of it would be legally registered under my name. The company would be granted an exclusive license to produce and sell these designs, but this license was contingent on my continued employment. At that moment, the owner didn't even question the clause. The company was insignificant, and they were simply grateful to have someone capable of designing furniture that people would buy. To be honest, I doubt anyone fully grasped its implications. Nevertheless, it was all there in black and white within my contract, duly signed and witnessed, but it remained in a filing cabinet, collecting dust, as we all focused on expanding the business. And expand it we did. Over time, my designs became the company's top sellers. Our trademark lounger, a chic item with curved lines and an inventive reclining feature, became a common sight at resorts all over the Mediterranean. The modular cabana system I developed gave hotels the flexibility to arrange their spaces in countless different ways. The daybed collection I conceived grew so popular that cheaper imitations started to surface, which served as a validation of our success. The company expanded from 15 employees to more than 60. We established a larger workshop, brought on a sales team, and entered new markets. I was traveling incessantly, meeting with hotel clients, participating in trade shows, leading the design team, and so on. My income increased in tandem. I wasn't wealthy, but I lived comfortably. More importantly, I took pride in what we had accomplished. However, there is an aspect of creative work that many fail to grasp. It is incredibly draining. It's not just the physical toll from travel and workshop hours, but also the mental and emotional exhaustion. Each design project demanded my complete immersion. I'd wake at 3 a.m. with new concepts, sketch them out, obsess over details, agonize about material selections, and then endure the constant revisions from client feedback, the compromises needed to meet budget targets, and the frustration when manufacturers couldn't bring my vision to life. After a decade of this relentless pace, I was completely exhausted. I experienced difficulty sleeping, struggled to generate fresh ideas, and felt as if I were operating on empty. I needed a pause, not just a week-long holiday, but a genuine, prolonged break to recharge and rediscover my passion for design. I approached the owner to discuss taking a sabbatical. I suggested a 6-month, unpaid period where I would totally disconnect from the company. No emails, no phone calls, no meetings, just pure time off. I had dedicated a decade of hard work and had never requested anything more than my standard vacation time. I felt it was a fair proposal, and the owner, to his credit, agreed immediately. He recognized my burnout and understood that the company's success was largely dependent on my designs, so he approved it without any pushback. We formalized the arrangement with an agreement signed by both him and HR, which clearly outlined the dates, confirmed it was unpaid leave, stated I had no work-related duties during this time, and assured me my position would be available upon my return. I selected Zanzibar, Tanzania, as my getaway. The island had always captivated me, and a friend connected me with a small guesthouse near the beach that was looking for a house-sitter for several months. It was an ideal setup. I traveled with minimal luggage, purchased my ticket, and flew to Africa for 6 months of swimming, reading, and a complete break from furniture design. Zanzibar was precisely what I needed. I stayed in a modest room near the shore, spent my mornings swimming in the brilliant blue water, my afternoons reading under the palm trees, and my evenings admiring the breathtaking sunsets. The rhythm of life there was a stark contrast to Cyprus. No one was in a hurry, and people engaged in conversation rather than being glued to their phones. It was wonderful. The guesthouse owner, a warm local woman who had inherited the business from her parents, mentioned she was considering updating some of the outdoor furniture. I offered some informal advice, nothing official, just friendly tips on local materials and straightforward designs suitable for the tropical environment. As a favor, I helped sketch a few simple items, which a local carpenter then constructed. It was enjoyable to design something uncomplicated and modest, free from corporate pressures or profit margins. This was a minor project, nothing that would rival the high-end resort furniture I typically designed. Meanwhile, back in Cyprus, significant changes were taking place. The original owner, the man who had hired me and built the company from scratch, chose to step back from daily management. He was aging and wished to enjoy the fruits of his labor rather than oversee every little detail. While he kept his majority ownership, he brought in a new managing director to handle operations. This new individual was, based on what I heard through rumors, the polar opposite of the founder. He was younger, likely in his early 30s, held a prestigious degree from a well-known institution, and had a corporate background. His focus was on efficiency, metrics, organizational changes, and eradicating what he termed legacy practices. The longtime employees told me he was always walking around with a tablet, constantly monitoring dashboards and spreadsheets, and appeared to see the company solely as figures on a screen rather than as a group of people crafting furniture. Initially, I didn't pay much heed to these developments. I was, after all, in Zanzibar, intentionally detached from workplace politics. I checked my personal email about once a week, mostly out of curiosity rather than necessity. I had made it abundantly clear to everyone that I was unavailable for work-related issues, as my sabbatical agreement explicitly stated. However, approximately 3 months into my leave, I received an email that sent my blood pressure soaring. It was from the new managing director, and his tone was hostile from the outset. He insisted that I join weekly video conferences to account for my cost to the company and demonstrate my ongoing value. He wrote about how everyone else was working diligently while I was supposedly on a prolonged holiday, and how this was intolerable in their new company culture. I reread the email 3 times while sitting in a beachside cafe in Zanzibar, utterly astonished. First, my sabbatical was unpaid. I wasn't costing the company a single cent, aside from the theoretical presence of my salary line on the organizational chart, which was set at 0. Second, the entire purpose of a sabbatical was to be on leave with no work responsibilities. That was the explicit agreement. I took a deep breath and chose to reply in a calm and professional manner. I am not typically a confrontational person and assumed this was merely a misunderstanding. Perhaps HR had not adequately informed him of my arrangement. So, I composed a courteous email clarifying that my sabbatical was a pre-approved, unpaid leave of absence with no work duties, and I attached a copy of the signed agreement. I emphasized the clauses specifying that it was unpaid and obligation-free, and I requested his confirmation that he had reviewed the document. I believed that would resolve the matter, but I was sorely mistaken. His reply arrived within hours and was even more aggressive than his initial message. He accused me of being entitled and behaving like a partner rather than an employee. He added some remarks about the company needing young blood and fresh thinking instead of what he called old designers who think they are artists. For the record, I'm not that old, but it seemed anyone over 35 was ancient in his view. By the way, guys, just to interject out of curiosity, let me know your age in the comments. It would be interesting to find out. Also, please share where you are watching from today. Anyway, he persisted in claiming I was draining company funds by taking paid leave, despite my having explicitly provided him with the agreement proving it was unpaid. It was either that he was incapable of reading or he was intentionally being dishonest. I suspected the latter. I replied once more, with even greater composure, simply reiterating the facts and reattaching the agreement. I kept my response strictly factual, mentioning dates, clauses, and signatures, with no emotion or debate, just the documentation. I was beginning to create a paper trail, though I wasn't entirely sure why at the time. It just seemed crucial to have everything recorded in writing. This exchange continued for a few weeks. He would send aggressive messages, and I would counter with calm facts and supporting documents. He started including other people in the email chains, obviously attempting to discredit me, but anyone who bothered to read the entire thread could see I was merely referencing the terms of the signed agreement. Through friends still employed at the company, I learned what was truly happening. The new managing director was reportedly fixated on cutting costs and getting rid of dead weight, as he so charmingly described it. He had been reviewing the organizational chart, examining salaries and years of service, and had flagged several long-term employees he deemed overpaid. Apparently, I was at the very top of his list. In meetings, he had been complaining loudly about me. According to my sources, he would say things like I was too old, overpaid, and a dinosaur designer who thinks is an artist, and worst of all, getting paid to lie on a beach in Africa. He was deliberately misleading people, telling them I was costing the company thousands each month while doing nothing, even though payroll records clearly indicated my sabbatical was unpaid. The man seemed to despise the fact that I had any degree of autonomy or a special arrangement. In his corporate mindset, every employee should be interchangeable and easily replaceable. The notion that a designer could possess actual value beyond their immediate output seemed to infuriate him. Then came the meeting where everything came to a head. The new managing director scheduled a meeting with the owners and senior staff. He had prepared an entire presentation on organizational efficiency and cost reduction. When he reached my name on the organizational chart, he went on a tirade. According to attendees, he asserted that I was a dead weight, too old, and overpaid, and that he could employ 2 junior designers for my salary. He continued to repeat his lie about me being paid during my sabbatical until someone from HR gently interjected that, in fact, the sabbatical was unpaid and he might want to verify his records. Instead of retracting his statements when presented with the facts, he intensified his stance. He argued it was the principle of the matter, and that no single employee should wield so much influence over the product line. He asserted that he could easily substitute my designs, that they weren't that special, and that any decent designer could produce the same quality of work. The original owner, who was present at the meeting, apparently attempted to counter his arguments. He noted that the company's expansion was largely due to my designs, that clients specifically sought out my work, and that replacing me was not as straightforward as the managing director believed. But the new executive was resolute. He had persuaded himself that I was the issue, and he was not going to let the truth obstruct his plan. He pressured the owners, using business school jargon about their sunk cost fallacy and organizational restructuring, and ultimately convinced them to allow him to resolve the situation. And resolve it he did. Without seeking legal advice, without looking at my original employment contract, and without considering the consequences, he sent me an email. I was at that same beachside cafe in Zanzibar when I received it. The message was cold and direct. It stated that due to restructuring and business requirements, my employment was terminated, effective immediately. My sabbatical was revoked. I was no longer an employee of the company, and HR would handle my final arrangements. No severance, no phone call, nothing, just a smug little note essentially saying, "You're fired." I sat there, looking at my phone for a long time, and then I burst out laughing. I couldn't stop myself. The sheer foolishness of his action was almost poetic in its perfection. You see, he had never bothered to read my original employment contract. He was unaware of the clause regarding design rights, and he failed to realize that every single product the company was selling, every design in their catalog, and every item they had in production was registered under my personal name. I took a screenshot of his termination email. Then I returned to my room, opened my laptop, and retrieved my employment contract. I reviewed the relevant clauses with great care to be absolutely certain of my understanding. The wording was unequivocal. I retained all registered design rights for the products I had created. The company held an exclusive license to produce and sell those designs, but only as long as I was an employee. Upon the termination of my employment for any reason, the company's license would expire after a brief 30-day grace period. After that, any further use of my designs would necessitate a new licensing agreement. It was all there, signed and dated, completely lawful and enforceable. I composed my reply with caution. I expressed my gratitude for the written notice of my termination. Then, I cited the specific contract clauses concerning design rights and the automatic termination of the license. I explained, in a very polite and professional tone, that as a result of his termination of my employment, the company's exclusive license to manufacture and sell my registered designs would conclude in 30 days. After that date, any continued use would require a new licensing arrangement. I made no threats and showed no emotion. I simply presented the facts and requested that he acknowledge receipt and ensure the company would comply. I attached copies of the relevant contract pages and the design registration certificates, all of which clearly indicated the designs were registered in my name. Then, I clicked send and went for a swim. His reply arrived sooner than I anticipated. He was enraged and wrote some absurd nonsense along the lines of, "We own everything you made here, and you don't own anything. We paid you a salary for your work." This essentially confirmed that he had never actually reviewed my contract and had no comprehension of the situation. I sent a final response. I attached their complete employment contract, highlighted the pertinent sections, and included all the registration certificates once more. I simply suggested that he consult with the company's legal counsel. I also mentioned that I would be open to discussing a commercial licensing agreement as an independent designer in the future, but that, as he had insisted, I was no longer affiliated with the company. And then, I ceased all communication. He sent several more emails, each more irate than the last, demanding I participate in a video call to discuss this properly. I ignored them all. I had stated everything that needed to be said, and the documents were self-explanatory. I returned to savoring my time in Zanzibar, but now with a certain sense of anticipation for what was to come. Back in Cyprus, the 30-day grace period started to count down, and the managing director did nothing at all. He had apparently convinced himself it was all a bluff, that I was simply resentful about being dismissed and was trying to intimidate them. He told people I was lying, that the company obviously owned all the designs, and that there was no way an employee could retain such rights. Meanwhile, the company had substantial commitments. They had contracts with hotel chains for the upcoming season's furniture deliveries, all of which were based on my designs. All of their marketing materials, their website, and their trade show displays featured my signature collections. These designs were not merely products, they constituted the company's entire brand identity. When one of the larger hotel groups requested proof of design rights as part of their due diligence for a contract, someone at the company finally forwarded my original employment contract to their lawyer. I learned about the subsequent events from several sources, and apparently, the fallout was spectacular. The company's lawyer examined the contract, checked the design registrations, and reviewed the email correspondence between me and the managing director. He essentially informed them that they were in a completely untenable position. The lawyer's assessment, from what I was told, was unambiguous. The designs were registered under my personal name. The company had only ever possessed a license that was contingent on my employment. By terminating my contract and disregarding my contractual warnings, they had forfeited the legal right to continue producing or selling any of those products. To continue production would constitute design infringement, which could subject them to legal action, not just from me, but could also deter hotel clients who wanted to avoid involvement in intellectual property conflicts. The lawyer also apparently noted that the email trail was incredibly damaging for them. The managing director had explicitly declared that I was no longer associated with the company and had completely ignored my clear contractual warnings sent from Zanzibar. There was no room for interpretation. He had fired me, cancelled my sabbatical, and walked directly into a legal predicament of his own creation. The owners were thrown into a panic. They had taken deposits from resorts for orders they might not be able to legally fulfill. They had a major marketing campaign that might have to be entirely scrapped. And they had production lines in operation that were potentially violating my design rights. The entire foundation of the company had suddenly turned to sand. The emails and phone calls began to pour in. And suddenly, everyone was extremely courteous to me. They claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that the managing director had been a bit harsh, and that they would be delighted for me to return. They offered me my old position back, along with a modest salary increase, if I would simply reinstate the license and allow them to continue using the designs. I was still in Zanzibar, watching the sunset from my beach chair, when these messages started to come in. I took my time in replying, waiting days in some instances. When I finally did respond, I did precisely what the managing director had originally demanded. I acted as if I were no longer connected to the company. I was not a desperate former employee pleading for my job back. I was an independent designer who owned valuable intellectual property that they wished to license. I retained my lawyer friend to draft a formal licensing proposal. We assessed the revenue the company had earned from my designs over the years, their potential future earnings, and what a fair market rate would be for licensing those rights. The proposal included a significant lump sum payment for past and present use of the designs, plus ongoing royalty payments for each item produced, with explicit terms, renewal conditions, and deadlines. The figures were not excessive, but they were certainly not cheap. Considering the amount of money the company had made from my work over the years, it was actually quite fair, but it was considerably more than they had ever paid me in salary. When the managing director saw the proposal, he reportedly lost his composure entirely. He called me a blackmailer and a greedy old man, accused me of holding the company hostage, and sent several completely unhinged emails threatening legal action for extortion. I did not reply to any of his tirades. Instead, my lawyer forwarded his threats to the owners, along with a complete email history, which showed how the managing director had lied about my sabbatical being paid, terminated me without cause, and ignored contractual warnings, thereby jeopardizing the entire product line through his ignorance and ego. The paper trail we had created was flawless. Every email, every document, every warning was there in black and white. It clearly demonstrated what had occurred and who was at fault. The owners convened an emergency meeting, and from what I heard, it was intense. They had finally grasped the full magnitude of the crisis. They couldn't afford my licensing proposal without a severe impact on their finances. However, they also couldn't simply redesign their entire product line in a short time. Any hastily done redesign by junior staff would appear generic and cheap compared to the sophisticated collections I had developed over a decade. They were cornered, and it was entirely the managing director's fault. To save face with investors and attempt to mitigate the damage, they dismissed him quietly, without much public notice, but he was out. However, the harm was already done. News had spread within the industry. Hotels were hearing whispers of design right problems and intellectual property conflicts. Several clients began to feel uneasy about their orders, and some contracts were cancelled. Others were delayed pending clarification, and the company's reputation suffered a major blow. No one wants to purchase furniture that might be entangled in a legal conflict. Meanwhile, I was still in Zanzibar, and I had received an interesting offer. One of the company's larger European competitors had been trying to recruit me for years. They had made proposals before, but I had always remained loyal to my original company. But now, given everything that had transpired, they recognized an opportunity. The competitor flew their director of design to Zanzibar to meet with me personally. We had lunch at a beachfront restaurant, and he presented an offer that was, frankly, almost too good to be true. They wanted me to join their design team with complete creative autonomy. The salary was 5 times what I had been earning in Cyprus, and they would cover the cost of maintaining a home in Cyprus while also providing a design studio at their European headquarters. I could travel to places like Zanzibar whenever I wished, and they would honor my need for creative space and periodic breaks. Most importantly, they understood and valued intellectual property rights, and they had proper licensing agreements with all their designers. Everything was professional and transparent. I didn't have to deliberate for very long. I accepted. The original company in Cyprus made one final, desperate effort to win me back. The owner himself called me, apologized profusely for what had occurred, and essentially said I could have anything I wanted if I would just come back and let them continue using the designs. To be honest, I felt sorry for him. He had built the company from the ground up, and it wasn't his fault that he had hired an incompetent managing director who had wrecked everything. But I also knew the company was too damaged for a simple fix. The reputational damage, the cancelled contracts, the financial pressure of trying to redesign products while also managing the consequences of firing their managing director, it was all too much. I politely declined. I told him I was grateful for the apology but that I had moved on. I wished him the best and concluded the call. Over the subsequent months, I received updates from former colleagues still in Cyprus. The company attempted to redesign its product line, but the new designs lacked the elegance and unique style that had been the key to their success. They looked generic, like cheap imitations of their own previous products. The resort clients who had been faithful for years began to switch to competitors. And yes, some of them switched to my new employer, specifically asking for my designs. It was all handled professionally and ethically. I was creating new collections, not just replicating my old work, but clients recognized my distinct style and aesthetic. The Cyprus company's revenue plummeted, and they had to lay off employees, close their expanded workshop, and downsize their operations. They didn't go completely out of business, but they were reduced to a mere fraction of their former selves. The original owner eventually sold his shares and retired, disappointed by how everything had concluded. As for the managing director who had caused all this, I heard he had difficulty finding another job. News travels fast in these industries, and no one wants to hire someone who nearly bankrupted a successful company through sheer arrogance and incompetence. As for me, I am writing this from Zanzibar once again. My new employer was understanding when I explained that I needed to return here for a few months as part of my creative process. They are paying my full salary, respecting my need for personal space, and have faith in my methods. I have already designed 3 new collections for them, and all are performing exceptionally well. I wake up when I choose, swim in the ocean, sketch concepts under palm trees, and have video calls with the production team as needed. I am earning 5 times my previous salary, I am happier than I have been in years, and I am producing some of my finest work. The lesson of this entire absurd tale is this: don't dismiss the person who holds the intellectual property rights to your whole product line. Especially, don't do it while they are on a beach in Zanzibar with nothing but time to meticulously review contracts and document everything. And certainly don't do it just because you believe they are too old or overpaid without truly understanding their contribution to the company. And the next story is a fantastic revenge tale you won't want to miss. It's titled, "Framed and Fired While the Boss Was Away." So I took him down with me. Years ago, I worked at, let's just call it, Mexican Subway. I was in high school and genuinely enjoyed my job there, working alongside some of my friends, including one girl I had known since the 3rd grade. We had a kitchen manager we'll call Judd. Judd was an absolute creep show of a 27-year-old. He drove a noisy car, believed that yelling in your face made him seem cool, and frequently boasted about his two girlfriends, aged 18 and 35. But there was more to know about Judd. One day after work, my friend and another female co-worker were complaining about him. I listened in shock as I learned about Judd's other pastime, frequent attempted sexual assault of the female staff. From groping and rubbing to asking inappropriate questions, he did it all. His worst tactic was to follow a girl into the walk-in refrigerator, switch on the light, and block the exit while suggesting they engage in physical activities. I felt nauseous. I had no idea this was happening. I knew he was despicable and gross, but not to this extent. Now, for a brief aside, I have never been a particularly athletic guy, and I prefer not to reveal too much about myself to people I dislike. So, Judd was unaware that I was a purple belt and an assistant instructor in a peculiar hybrid martial arts class taught by a friend, which he described as a combination of jiu-jitsu and Hawaiian bone crushing. I have no idea how legitimate the latter is, but suffice it to say, I was not inclined to stand by and let Judd continue his predatory behavior. One day, I saw one of my friends enter the fridge, with Judd right behind her. I immediately dropped what I was doing and headed to the fridge. Inside, my friend was backed against the wall as Judd stood near the door, with the lights on this time. I told my friend to leave the fridge, which she did promptly. Now it was just me and Judd. I walked up and got directly in his face. He started to explain what I had witnessed. I interrupted him. "If I ever hear you saying disgusting crap to a girl ever again, I will beat the F out of you." He began to speak again, his face turning angry, but I yelled, "Do you understand me, Judd? I hear anything at all about you again, and I will hurt you. Then I'll report you to the police. Trust me." Then I left, turning off the lights on my way out. A few days later, I received a call on my day off from a co-worker asking where I was. It turned out Judd had altered the schedule the previous night and had neglected to inform me. The next day, the same thing happened. My 1 p.m. shift had suddenly become the opening shift, and I was late once more. This occurred a third time, and I was terminated by a visiting regional manager while our general manager was away on a TV show. It was clear what had transpired, and I was not going to accept it passively. Now, this was in the mid-2000s, and online ordering was a brand new concept. This meant websites were not very secure. And I knew both the busiest times of the day and the items we ran out of most frequently that took a long time to prepare. Every day for a week after I was fired, I would use my grandmother's computer to visit their website, create a fake name or three, and order hundreds of dollars worth of very complex burritos. Everything with extra sour cream and guacamole, gooey messes that are difficult to roll, hard tacos, of which we only made 4 to 5 sets per shift, with double meat. All for 5-minute pickup windows during peak lunchtime or dinner rush hours, whenever Judd was on duty. In that week, I ordered well over $1,500 to $2,000 worth of food that was never paid for and had to be discarded. By that point, I had no friends still working there, so I felt no guilt for the chaos. I later learned from a co-worker that 2 weeks after I was let go, Judd was fired. It turns out being the manager on duty when thousands of dollars are thrown away and food wait times extend far beyond acceptable limits is enough to finally get rid of the guy everyone despised. I never told my friend what happened in the fridge, and I wouldn't change a thing if I could do it again. Also, my cousin may or may not have used his tire shop tools to remove Judd's valve stems one particularly dark evening. It's hard to get to your girlfriend's house when you can't inflate your tires. And before we conclude the video, let's read another petty revenge story. This one is titled, "I put a fake note on a Corvette's windshield that read, 'Sorry I hit your car.' You probably won't even notice the damage because it was taking up for spots." So, the title is quite self-explanatory, but I will provide more detail for you. I was attempting to find a parking space at my university. The lot was notoriously full, but my campus had limited options. While looking, I noticed a Corvette occupying for prime parking spots near the front of the lot. After about 10 minutes of waiting and searching for a spot, One became available toward the back of the lot. Furious at the audacity of the driver for being so inconsiderate, I wrote a note that said, "Sorry I hit your car. You probably won't even notice the damage," and placed it on their windshield. When I finished my class and was returning to my car, I saw a very stereotypical college-aged Corvette owner frantically inspecting their vehicle while shouting into their phone. I don't know who they were speaking to, but I feel sorry for them for having to deal with this person. And that's all, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.